The doctor's office was the first place I had ever sat across from an authority figure who was not Amish, who did not belong to my community, and who had absolutely no investment in maintaining the stories I had been told my entire life about what was normal, what was acceptable, what was simply the way things were supposed to be. I remember sitting there in a chair that was not a kitchen chair, in a room that smelled like antiseptic instead of wood smoke, and realizing that I had no idea what was about to happen. I had come in believing one thing about myself. I was about to leave believing something entirely different. My name is Hannah. I grew up Old Order Amish in Holmes County, Ohio. I married at 19 and left at 27. On this channel, I tell the stories that lived behind closed farmhouse doors, the ones I was never supposed to repeat. Today, I want to tell you about the moment an English doctor said something so ordinary to me that it took me years to understand how revolutionary it actually was. I had not wanted to go to the doctor. I had not wanted to leave the community, even temporarily, to drive to a clinic an hour away. In our world, doctors were something you went to when there was already a catastrophe, when the midwife and the home remedies and the prayer had all failed to fix something. You did not go for regular checkups. You did not go because something felt wrong. You suffered, you prayed, and if God intended you to recover, you recovered. If He intended otherwise, you accepted that too. But something had been wrong with me for a very long time, and I was no longer able to ignore it. I was 25 years old, and I could barely make it through a day without overwhelming exhaustion. I was bleeding heavily during my cycle, so heavily that I had started planning my week around it, knowing that there would be 3 days where I could barely stand. I had pain that came and went, sometimes sharp, sometimes a dull ache that never quite disappeared. And I was so tired, bone tired, the kind of tired that did not respond to sleep because it was not just physical. My mother suggested, cautiously, that perhaps I should see someone. She had noticed, she said, that I seemed to be struggling more than usual. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, suggested that I was simply not managing my energy well, that I was letting the children tire me out, that I needed to be more disciplined about rest and more faithful about prayer. Jonas did not have an opinion one way or the other. He did not discourage me from going to a doctor, but he also did not encourage me. He simply accepted that if I wanted to go, I would go, and that was that. What he did make clear was that this was my problem to solve. My exhaustion was not something he felt obligated to help with or even acknowledge as real. I made an appointment on a day when I had arranged for my sister to watch the children. I remember the drive to the clinic feeling like I was traveling to another country. The roads were wider, the buildings were taller, everything moved faster. I felt like a person stepping out of a photograph and into real life, and I was not entirely sure I belonged there. The doctor was a woman, which I was grateful for, though I did not realize it until I saw her face. She had gray hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and she listened to me describe my symptoms without ever making me feel like I was being dramatic or self-indulgent. She asked me questions. Not the kind of questions my family asked, which seemed designed to confirm that everything was probably fine and I was probably just tired. She asked questions that suggested she actually wanted to understand what was wrong. She did blood work. She asked about my cycle, my pain, my energy levels. She asked me about my marriage, about whether I was happy, about whether I felt safe at home. That last question caught me off guard. I remember sitting there trying to figure out how to answer it because, of course, I felt safe. I was not being hit. I was not being starved. I was not in any obvious danger. But as I sat there, I realized that safe and secure are not the same thing, and I had never felt entirely secure in my marriage, not once in 6 years. I did not answer her question directly. I said something vague about marriage being work, about how every marriage had its challenges. She nodded, and I got the sense that she understood something I was not saying. A week later, I went back for the results. And the doctor told me something that reframed my entire understanding of my own body. I had severe anemia. My iron levels were so low that the doctor was somewhat surprised I was able to function at all. I was also deficient in several vitamins, and my hormone levels suggested that my body was under extreme stress. She said the exhaustion made sense. My body was literally not able to function properly because it did not have the resources it needed. But here is the part that changed everything. She asked me very directly whether I was being given enough food to eat, whether I was resting enough, whether my husband was supporting me in taking care of my health. I remember sitting there, feeling something inside me go very quiet. because the answer to all three of those questions was no. I was not eating enough because there were always children to feed first, and often not enough food to go around. I was not resting because there was always more work to do. And my husband was not supporting me in taking care of my health because in his worldview, taking care of my health meant praying more and complaining less. The doctor prescribed iron supplements and told me that I needed to eat more protein, more vegetables, more of everything. Really, she told me that my body was telling me that it was in crisis and I needed to listen to it. She told me something that I had never heard anyone say before, something that seemed to contradict everything I had been taught my entire life. She said, your health matters, your body matters, and if the people around you are not supporting you in taking care of it, that is a problem. I remember driving home from that appointment feeling like I had been struck by lightning, because what she had said was so simple, so obvious, and so completely contrary to everything my community had taught me about what a wife was supposed to prioritize. My community had taught me that my husband's comfort mattered, my children's well-being mattered, the community's expectations mattered. My body was supposed to endure whatever was required of it without complaint. But this doctor, this English woman who did not know me, who had no stake in my marriage or my community, had suggested something radical. She had suggested that my body had value separate from its usefulness to other people. She had suggested that I was allowed to take care of it. She had suggested that if my husband was not supporting me in doing that, it was not a failure on my part. It was a problem with the situation. I started taking the iron supplements. I tried to eat more. I tried to rest more. And Jonas noticed immediately that something had shifted. He asked what the doctor had said, and I told him. I told him I was anemic, that I needed to eat more, that I needed more rest. And his response was to tell me very gently that I needed to not get ideas from English doctors about how things were supposed to work, that the American healthcare system was designed to make people dependent on pills, and that what I really needed was to trust God more and worry less about my body. He said this while I was taking iron supplements that were making the exhaustion somewhat more bearable, while I was finally getting a small amount of clarity about why I had felt so depleted for so long. And I understood something in that moment that I think I had been trying not to understand for years. I understood that my husband did not want me to be healthy, not consciously maybe, but systemically. My health, my well-being, my need for rest and nutrition, all of these things competed with his comfort. And in a marriage structured the way ours was, his comfort always won. I started thinking after that appointment about all the ways my body had been treated as a resource rather than as something that belonged to me. I thought about the pregnancies one after another without time to recover between them. I thought about the births, the bleeding, the exhaustion that came after. I thought about the nights when my body was expected to be available regardless of whether it was healed. I thought about the constant physical work, the standing all day, the lifting, the endless motion without rest. And I thought about how this was considered normal, how other women in my community lived the same way, how we all just accepted that our bodies were supposed to endure this, how we had been taught that complaining about it was a spiritual failure, but the doctor had given me something I had not had before. She had given me a framework in which my exhaustion was not a personal failing. It was a medical fact. My body was in crisis because it was not being given what it needed to survive. And while my community would have told me that I needed to accept that, to offer it up as suffering, the doctor had told me something different. She had told me that I was allowed to take care of myself, that my health mattered. I spent the next 2 years taking those supplements, trying to rest when I could, trying to eat a bit more even when it meant there was less for my children. And I spent those 2 years watching my husband's response to my attempts to take care of my body. He did not forbid me from taking the supplements, but he made it clear that he thought they were unnecessary. He did not stop me from eating more, but he also did not acknowledge that I needed to. He simply waited for me to get over this phase, this idea that my body had needs that deserved to be prioritized. By the time I was 26, I was starting to recover physically. My energy was returning. The heavy bleeding was becoming more manageable. And with that physical recovery came something else. Clarity. I started to understand that staying in a marriage where my health was considered secondary to my husband's comfort was not a choice I had to make. I started to understand that a doctor, an English woman with no connection to my community, had shown me something that nobody in my world had ever suggested, that my body was mine, that its needs were legitimate, that I was allowed to take care of it. And if I was allowed to take care of my body, I realized, then I was also allowed to ask myself whether this marriage was worth the cost my body was paying. It took another year before I actually left. But the decision had been made in that doctor's office when she told me that my health mattered. Because once I believed that, once I truly believed it, I could not go back to believing that enduring a marriage that was harming my health was what I was supposed to do. I think about that doctor often. I wonder if she knows how much that appointment changed my life. I wonder if she understood when she asked me whether I felt safe, whether my husband was supporting my health, that she was asking the question that would eventually lead me to leave an entire community and everything I had ever known. If you have ever had someone outside your world tell you that your well-being mattered, if you have ever had that moment where you realized that the way you were living was not normal or necessary, if you have ever started to question whether you had to accept the role you had been given, I see you. That moment is terrifying, and it is also the beginning of freedom. This is my story. If it stayed with you, tell me in the comments, and subscribe if you want to keep hearing the truth from behind the prayer cap.